success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Realtor listeners. Today I have Amy Anderson. She is the co-founder of Wild Coffee Marketing, PR marketing, the whole 9 yards. And if you watch us live, and I guess behind the curtain, we do this live, and then we have the audio and everything that goes out a little bit later. It could be a month later, it could be 2 months later, it could be a little while later. But if you watch us live, you would have noticed we've done this. This is like deja vu before. It didn't go as planned, yet when you're dealing with business and you're dealing with marketing, we're dealing with entrepreneurs, you're dealing with anything like that, things can go wrong and you adapt. Thank you, Amy, for allowing me to adapt, allowing our listeners to adapt and hear more about you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Vinny.
So what a question I always ask now is, what's your elevator pitch? When someone goes, Amy, what do you do? How do you describe yourself and your company?
Well, I love that you asked that. I am the co-founder of Wild Coffee, which is an outsourced CMO and marketing firm. So we're a little different than from the traditional agency or digital agency in that everything we do is rooted in strategy. And now, because marketing skill sets have to go so wide and so deep, it's really hard to have an in-house team. And it's really hard to outsource everything led by a sole person. So we do these fractional teams, and we actually replace the in-house marketing teams for a lot of companies.
When you say like fractional teams, what does that look like? Is it like a specialist in each department, or how does that work?
You're exactly right. So it could be social media writer, social media designer, video editor, long form content writer, graphic designer, video graphic designer, strategist, consultant, management, sort of marketing manager. So all of those things, SEO, PPC. So it's so sort of fractional now, the skill sets you're expected to have as a marketer. And it's really hard to hire an in-house team that covers the breadth of those services. And then if you hire an agency, where does the strategy come from? You need an in-house team that's constantly sort of rooted in the business and developing strategy to effectively lead an agency, which is an expensive model too. You're sort of double dipping there. So it's sort of an outsourced one-stop shop for everything from strategy all the way through implementation.
Now, when I think of PR, when I think of marketing, I think of a social butterfly. So was that who Amy was when she was younger, a social butterfly, the one out there, the head of the party?
Well, I think I've always had a personality a bit like that. But you know what's interesting is I started my career in New York in the early 90s. This is my 30th year. And I had some sales jobs because people took the personality and thought that I would be a great business development person. And it turns out I was not the best closer. I really wasn't super focused on asking for the money and talking about budget. I really wanted to be developing ideas. And so I sort of made I went in and out of that. But yeah, I think that's definitely been something that has led me. And I think I've learned how to sell. And if you can't sell yourself, then I don't know what you can sell. And I feel very comfortable selling myself and the capabilities that I have and my team has.
Okay, so you're in college, and were you a business major, marketing major? What was your major?
Absolutely not, Vinny. I was actually an art history and English double major at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Where I read books and I looked at art and wrote a lot of papers. I find kids now, I have a senior who's attending Auburn University in the fall. And I find that they have so much more focus on their vocation than we did. I mean, I don't know. Did you know in school what you wanted to do? Like, were you?
I mean, what I thought I was never going to do, I ended up getting to that business 7 years later afterwards. I go, I'm never getting real estate. And then things
Right,
change.
never to say never. I didn't even know. And then I went to New York City. I knew I wanted to live there and started interviewing, and I got a job in the marketing and sales department at 17 magazine. So a lot of my career, and this is what I talk to younger people about, I mentor in the entrepreneurship school here at Florida Gulf Coast University in Southwest Florida, is that a lot of your career is process of elimination, right? You take the pieces that you like from individual sort of jobs, areas, positions that you have, and you start to just keep going down that path. And it sounds like that's sort of what happened for you too, that you did something and then there was a shift after 7 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think you know who you are at 15 and you think you know who you are at 20, if you think you know who you are at 30, 35, 40, whatever it might be, you're constantly learning yourself and learning who you are, what you want, what you like, what you don't like. So it's
Absolutely. And I think
adapting.
our careers should be about that too. I think my leadership skills that I've developed over the years have been about that. I mean, I haven't always learned what to do right. You
Yeah.
learn from some of the leaders that, and what not to do. And I think it's been a lot of that as well.
So you're in sales. What does that look like? So they go, okay, they teach you, you got to make phone calls to other business owners. Was it to consumers? Who are you selling to?
I was selling to ad agencies and advertisers at the New York
Okay.
Times. I did some of that while I was in marketing. It was sort of blended, that role back in the
Okay.
90s when the internet was emerging, and I was part of the original group that started nytimes.com. So it was sort of a blended sales and marketing role. And yes, I had call reluctance. I was 24, 25. And now, when it's your own business, you have to realize like you may be, the best subject matter expert there is. But if you're not always selling as an entrepreneur, you don't have a business. You just don't. Because when you're first starting out, you can't have a sales team. It's you. And you're wearing so many hats. And I think that's where I just got really comfortable saying, in 2022, I think that the veneer's been ripped off a little bit. I think selling is a lot more transparent. It's a lot more based on the person's needs and just being honest about what you have and does what I have meet your needs. I think it's a lot of conversation that happens because people can gather so much information themselves. And I think it's a lot about connection.
Well, I mean, I think those ideas of selling probably rang true back then. It's probably, I think our understanding of selling has changed. I mean, and what it actually means. So talking about your journey for the art of selling, I mean, where did that come from? Where did your learning of selling and how you interpret selling kind of come from?
I think because marketing services, right, and marketing strategy and consulting services is what I sell now as part of my own firm, I think listening has been one of the areas that I know I've really needed to develop, which is not to be outside saying, I have this, I think this is your need. You get so much from listening and connecting, and then you can have a real conversation because what we sell is very diverse. I can't go in and like gangbusters and say, these are all the things that we have because there's so many areas that we touch that you really have to understand what they need first. So
Was that trial and error? Did you have a coach? Where did that
no,
where
I've
did that
never
come
had
from?
a coach. And I know that you interview a lot of coaches on your show and they're great. I've learned a lot doing my research. I never have. I do have a
Okay.
business partner. And that
Okay.
has been a really interesting journey. He actually hired me in 2004 to run marketing at what ended up being the second largest financial institution headquartered in the state of Florida at the time. It was a private mortgage company during sort of the boom of that era. And he was my manager and hired me. And then I went out on my own eventually and started consulting, and he joined me. And so it's really, I think, interesting, the partnership dynamic, because in a way they hold up a mirror to you and reflect back on you, and you bounce so much off of them that he has really sort of been my guidepost and mine his, I think. So.
Well, what do you think? I mean, I guess when he was the manager and he hired you on, and it's probably changed to this date. I mean,
Yes.
what is his yin to your yang? I mean, what's the other way?
Such a good question, because actually the Wild Coffee icon in our logo is a bear actually holding a cup of coffee. And our creative director said, when she was doing the exercise, she understood the assignment and said, if I could come up with a spirit animal that encompasses Solomon and Amy, what would it be? And a bear. And he is fierce and strong and maybe sometimes a little scary. He's a big presence and has a strong personality and is very sure of himself. And I'm a little bit more on the nurturing, softer side, right? So there's the teddy bear, grizzly bear sort of concept going on there. And our areas of focus and expertise are different. He is really phenomenal operationally. And I tend to be more of the creative brain, a little bit more of the marketing brain. So the combination of our skill sets, but I think you have to share values in order for long-term partnerships to work, right? So we've built a company based on kindness. We always believe in moving work forward for our companies. Energy is important to us. You have to be able to pivot really easily and be flexible in what we do, and you have to be a lifelong learner. And we really care about our people. We care about our clients, and I think we share those values, and that's why our partnership works also.
Well, I mean, I guess let's rewind even farther back. I mean, because it's an intriguing idea, and I always love the idea of when a partnership is built, because it sounds like there was synergy even from the start. You
Yes.
work for him, and then he joins your company, and now there's like a partnership. I mean, did you know that when you originally met him? How was that original interaction? Does it? I feel like there's going to be something here going in the future.
It's interesting. I think in marketing, you can have a tendency to have rolling deadlines.
Okay.
I think there are certain businesses that lend themselves to execution that you could keep trying to get better. You could keep not refining and not launching. I've never met someone who is so actionable and so adept at getting things done. And I learned a lot from that. Managing, I managed a 20-person team then. He probably had 80 people. And really figuring out how to be a leader that holds people accountable and moves work forward. And I've always really admired that about him. And then, with me, the creative side, I'm a little savant-y with being able to look at companies and brands and know what they should say and look like. So I think that complement of that, but really somebody who's really operationally focused while also being a great person is somebody that you want to attach yourself to. And it's been 18 years in different sort of capacities, and no signs of cracking anywhere. So
Do you do that? I mean, and maybe it was just something that happened organically over time, or that partnership, or is there actually intention to it where you see that there's something that you're missing and you go, oh my gosh, that person over there has that. Maybe there'll be a role for them down the road. Does that come about, or is it just more organically be open to opportunities?
yeah, I think it's more organic. It's funny. He and I can tell when we need to spend time together. I think we're very observational about the partnership and how things are going. It's stressful. We grew the company from 2 to 20 people in 4 years. COVID happened. So, we've all sort of been through a lot. And I think you have to really, it's a relationship, right? So it's a business relationship, but it needs to sort of be nurtured. And then I think we've figured out, what the Wild Coffee way is. And I think businesses and leaders need to look at that. When you're hiring, we've hired 18 people, 20 plus, over the last 4 years, is what are your values? How do you hire to those values? How do you lead your company according to those values? And potentially, how do you release people because maybe they don't fit ultimately? So I think it's really important, even if you have a 5-person company, 3-person company, to really understand what you stand for and what kind of relationships you have with your partners and people in the company, and then who you're hiring and how you're working with people. Same for clients, right? Not every client is a good fit for everyone. I mean, I'm sure you've encountered that with what you do.
Well, it's definitely powerful when you're able to fire a client, and it takes some time usually for it to actually happen. But when you can fire your first client, that's a great feeling.
We just had an amicable breakup with one recently. And it was really that, and you're moving so fast, and we move really fast, but you're moving so fast that you need an in-house team so you can walk down the hall and tell them to redo all their work. Very hard with an outsourced team to have us do things 3 times when you have a retainer hour, right? So we had a very amicable separation, and it did feel really good that we're in a position now where we can say, you know what, like this fit isn't great for the team. And I also think you need to take a stand for your team. If things are really hard on them, you have to look at it and say, what economic hit am I willing to take for the safety of these people who I really value, especially in a hiring market like the one we have right now.
Well, let's go into the sway of it that you were in the corporate world, then you were doing consulting, and then consulting to building the business. I mean, what did that look like? You're in the corporate world. This is not right for me. I'm going to get into consulting, or was it a side gig? I mean, can you walk us through that kind of transition from one to the next one to the next one?
Well, how personal can I be?
Please, please.
Fantastic. I was working in the corporate world. I said, I'm not an entrepreneur. I never will be. I am a corporate girl. I work in those environments really well. I'm too scared to do my own ideas. I don't think I can sell, but I can function as a VP of marketing or CMO really well. Then I had 2 young children, and I took some time off after my second one. He was a year. The mortgage crisis happened. I had a contract. I was able to take some time off. And then I got divorced unexpectedly. So I had not planned for that. And family law in Florida is such that, there can be some challenges if you haven't worked. So I had to decide, and I was very lucky to have parents who said, look, you've always exceeded our expectations. We'd like to invest in the consulting you want to do. Because I knew if I went back into a corporate environment with a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, that it would be very challenging for me as a single parent. So my parents invested in my consulting business. A year later, Solomon joined us, and they invested in me for a year. And then I was sort of free and clear and able to stand on my own. So I was very lucky to have a choice in that. It took some courage, I think, on my part, because I had convinced myself that I was a corporate player and I couldn't do this. But when you look in the faces of your kids and they've been through a lot and you want to be around, I was lucky enough to have a profession where I could try to consult and do it on my own. And I was able to succeed at it.
What does that feel like? Because there has to be some sort of pressure when someone close to you is invested money into you, right? And that has to be fairly daunting. So, what did that look like every day, every week, every month of knowing that you have to succeed?
Well, you live sparingly. I had to find sort of a new way of being in the world financially. My parents didn't put pressure on me. They did not ask a lot of questions about where are you here and there. I just started building. And I think a lot of this, someone asked me recently, like, what is one of the more valuable sort of qualities in an entrepreneur that you find? And I find consistency, having doing the same thing or doing something every day. And even when you're scared, or even when you face challenges, or you have to pivot, to be consistent every single day. And that's what I did. I wasn't even a good work from home person. I loved showing up in the office in my fancy clothes and, being around all the people. And all of a sudden I'm sitting alone in a room making phone calls saying, hey, I've gone out on my own. And I was doing a lot of restaurant PR in the beginning, some event planning PR in Miami, where I had lived for 17 years. And I think you just have to turn your brain off and focus and be consistent and keep trying to build, So it's funny, my parents can't talk about it now without getting a little bit emotional about it, which is very meaningful to me, that they're proud that they invested in and what I've been able to accomplish.
Do you ever see, and we talked about it briefly before about, being more real, being authentic, and being in the PR business. I've had a lot of PR business owners on this platform, and they show off a shiny object, right? And so my perception of it is for PR people to be out there, be outgoing, and have a shiny object. And especially you're going through kind of a financial struggle right there when you originally started. How open were you with your own journey compared to I'm successful, I'm strong, don't worry about what I'm doing, almost hide it, push it backwards? How did that look like that first year?
I think necessity breeds a lot of courage sometimes, right? Yeah. I remember calling the food editor of the Miami Herald, with a brand new restaurant with Brazilian owners and no sort of reputation or anything, and inviting him into the restaurant, inviting other reporters and influencers into the restaurant. I wasn't sure about my client, wasn't sure about myself, but I knew that I had to just sort of pretend that I had already made it, And I talked to my team about that. They've said, well, you can get in front of people and say that what you think is true. I said, guys, I don't always know. But sometimes I think, take a shot at it, pretend you've already made it, and don't think so hard about it. It's easier said than done. But I remember just feeling sort of desperately scared and unsure about it, but they showed up. I got the restaurant reviewed in the Herald, and then everything builds on something else. Then you have something else to talk about. You have another example to show. You have another win, and then those continue to add. And even in our consulting business, we started with very small companies and small retainers, and now I work with national sort of marquee brands. But that had to build. I couldn't start there.
Do you have a process? Do you have a system that, like, because you said that you weren't fully sure, yet you brought confidence to it, right? So is there like a process you go through where you look in the mirror, or is it you write it down why this thing's going to be successful, or is it just, I'm going to just turn this light on and go?
I think writing down and sort of manifesting some things a little bit, or, sort of writing what you're projecting out into the world and what you're looking to get back from that. I mean, I definitely, before I go on podcasts and before I talk to people like you, I look through sort of my story of where I've come from, what's important to me, and remind myself that, sometimes even just reminding yourself that you have something to say. There's that imposter syndrome sometimes as a leader and business owner. It's the fear that you're going to be found out, that it's sort of fraudulent. And it's interesting. I have a 15-year-old son who lives away from home, lives 3.5 hours north in Orlando, Florida, and plays for Orlando City SC's MLS Pro Path Academy. So he's one of about 40 boys who goes to school at the facility, trains 2 times a day. And the American soccer system is now competing on the world stage because they're taking children out of school at 12. Wow. And it's like other sports like gymnastics, things where kids are homeschooled, living away from home and being in a system. And, recently he had a tough tournament in DC. No, actually he was in Dallas. Sorry. He's in DC next weekend. And, was shaken a little, and mind you, he's a 15-year-old brain. And I took him out to the beach here. I said, you have to switch environments with teenagers. Like looking at them in the face at home is not always the best approach. And we walked side by side along the beach. And I said, sometimes I have cracks in my confidence, right? I'm looking at my team, wondering on Zoom, right? Because we can't even be in the same place. We're all distributed. What are they thinking? And what do they think about me and what I'm saying right now? Or does a client really believe this? Or do they think we're good at this? And he was sort of surprised, that at 50 years old, I'm still sort of dealing with that. And I think we all go through it, right? And I think it's the important part is just to recognize that's normal. Those are normal thoughts, but I call them little thoughts. I'm like, those are baby thoughts. We let the baby thoughts pass and we keep fighting. And I said, you need to keep fighting. And big dreamers have bumpy roads, right? You don't have big dreams or big aspirations, then maybe it'll be a little easier. You can stay in the middle, not so many up and downs, but you're trying to become a professional soccer player at 15. I took a consulting business from just me in my living room to 20 people. You're going to have some bumps along the way and just embrace those.
Yeah. If you don't have bumpy roads, you probably have a boring life.
That's what I think. Sometimes they feel a little too bumpy. This has been quite a week, Vinny. I got to tell you. There's some weeks that are like, gosh, what would it be like just to have a job again? So. I
think that's probably most entrepreneurs, business owners. It's like, wouldn't it just be easier to really just shut it off, not have to deal with the extra stuff?
Yeah. And that's why I find having a partner has been really tremendous because it gets lonely.
Yeah. Well, talking about big dreams, big aspirations, bumpy roads. Where do you see yourself and your company in the next 5 years?
Oh, well, I'm aiming to transform how companies do marketing, right? So having in-house employees plus agencies plus freelancers creating a really disjointed strategy that has a higher cost structure than it should doesn't make sense to me. And I really want to transform how a lot of CEOs approach marketing, knowing, wait a second, I need so many skill sets and so much diversity. And I actually need a CMO because every company does, but maybe not full time because maybe they can set the strategy and send us on our way and then have people implement. So I'm looking to sort of transform how companies structure marketing teams. So in 5 years, we have plans, right? So I think every business needs to have quarterly plans. We don't, plus your annual, but your annual is maybe 5 or 6 points. It's revenue goals, employees, services that you offer. So we do 1, 3, and 5 year plus quarterly. And we have very structured meetings every quarter. Did we hit goals? What are our goals for next quarter? And we do those in person. So I do fly people in for that. But I see us at about 50 people and continuing to work with some big brands. And we're starting to specialize in a few areas and developing some depth there that has been a lot of fun.
What in being that you're talking about most of your businesses, I guess, or not most of your business, but most of your employees, your meetings are virtually these days. I mean, and it seems like more people are able to interact virtually, right? So when you're crossing the lines of employees in the US compared to maybe third world countries or other countries where the cost is more affordable or cheaper, right? How do you compete with that? How do you hire outside of the US? I mean, how does that interaction kind of work?
Well, I think that our clients need experienced marketing people. And a lot of firms like ours and digital firms will sort of have the owners sell you in, or senior people, and then hand you off to less experienced team members. We don't do that. So our payroll is quite expensive. Everyone is US based. We are exploring some nearshoring in Colombia, just for maybe some more commoditized services, like some graphic design, not our big design projects, but sort of that. But I think also when you're running a distributed team, you have to create systems of accountability to make sure everybody's good and getting things done. And we've done that. And also, how do you keep people feeling a part of things? How do you connect with them? How do you build teams? How do you create camaraderie? And I came out of a meeting today where we're working on some design processes. How does work flow through the firm? And they are so cooperative and helpful to each other. So how do you know that when you're hiring? Is that something that you hire or you create? I don't know the answer to that, but they're pretty amazing. I just think our leadership in a distributed world has to be really deliberate. And if you're going to offshore and look for a lower cost employee based, you have to really look at your culture, language, speed. It's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah, I've dabbled in cold callers in the Philippines, and even though the language is, really good, there's still that language barrier. It's a little bit off.
Yes, actually, it's funny you mentioned the Philippines. We're hiring a virtual assistant from there, so I'll let you know how it goes.
I have a virtual assistant that does paperwork for us, but it's
different than cold calling and selling, and right.
Exactly. You have to find the niche. You have to find it's definitely a balancing act of it all. But
yes,
totally.
And all of our employees are full time. So we have all FTEs, and that was something that we didn't start with. We had everyone on 1099s, and that was I forget what a big step that was to bring everybody in and bring on health insurance and 401k matching and all of the things that we do to try to create a place. My goal is that there's a group of people that I'm so honored that they trust me to come work at Wild Coffee, but that we create a really good experience for them where they're learning, developing, growing, and I give them everything they need to work wherever they want, but they don't want to, that they want to stay. And that I think about all the time with them.
If you look back at, Amy before she started Wild Coffee, are there nuggets that you kind of like provide to her about the hiring process, the structure, everything? Are there things that you've picked up? You go, oh my gosh, if I knew that then, I'd be a little bit farther along.
Hire a CFO early. Yes, I think that having someone who can provide a forward view of cash forecasting and your business and your margins and your gross profit and all of that very early. I think we tend to handle a lot of our finance operations as entrepreneurs ourselves, but we're missing, unless you have a finance background, you can hire, we always had an accounting firm, but they're looking backwards. What made a big difference for us is to have a highly skilled fractional CFO who was forward looking and forecasting and advising us on ways to create profitability within the company and really help us understand where that was coming from and be able to sort of exploit that as we grow. It has been a game changer for us. I would have done that much earlier.
Well, thank you, Amy, for being here today. If people are listening and they're looking to fill in the gaps where they maybe are lacking a little bit, what's the best way of them reaching out to you, finding more information about your company? What would be the best way of going about that?
Sure. So we're at wildcoffeemarketing.com, which is a great way to see sort of samples of our work and get in touch with us. And then I'm also findable as Amy Anderson on LinkedIn at Wild Coffee. So,
all right, I want to finish off this one last question, and this might be a very difficult one. All right, if it's a newer company out there, a newer business, and they have some extra funds, right? What would be the one department that you guys would outsource or provide work for that they should probably focus on? Would it be more of the digital marketing aspect of it? Would it be more of the actual verbiage of it? I mean, is there a department that is probably the one to spend those extra couple of dollars on? I know it's a very difficult one because you probably love all your different departments.
yeah, I like when a company is shorter on budget. I like Google AdWords. I like search marketing, right? Because at least it's intent based, right? Somebody is actively searching for your product or service, right? So you're not doing display advertising. You're not doing sort of offline. You know it's intent based. We call it mid funnel, right? So that's where I'll direct them. The only thing with that is if you are sending people to the homepage of your website after clicking on a search ad, then you're making a mistake. That it has to be landing page based. It has to be related to the ads and the keywords you're using. But I really like intent-based advertising, mid-funnel sort of AdWords with Google.
Well, thank you again, Amy, for being here today. For everyone listening, I mean, the thing that I picked up, and everyone that's listening to this is going to pick up something different, but it's really relationship based. I mean, Amy talked about it. She went to college for one thing, left college, did something else. But that relationship that she had with her manager, where he hired her, brought her along, and then that connection just stayed strong. And then again, relationship based with her parents, that they basically had the love, the want for her to succeed. And maybe it might not be your parents are the ones that want you to succeed, but there's probably someone else out there. So talk to people, tell people your journey, tell people your hopes, tell people your aspirations. And if you build those relationships, someone out there wants to believe in you just as much as you want to believe in yourself. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, please share, and go in the show notes and find Amy. Bye, everyone.